music?
Yeah.
Yeah, after Amy, I'll live stream something.
Okay, no problem.
Pastor, I like your beard. You look like Adam.
Well, I'm trying to look like you and Methuselah, so I'm not sure if I'm being successful. I heard their beard was down to here, but you know, these
my girls complained, so I had to trim it. My face was all full.
Yeah.
I think they don't like the white. They were saying they were going to dye it whilst I was asleep.
Well, once it's your beard, they can do what they want. It's not somebody else's beard.
Yeah.
So, Amy is here with us, and I think, Elder, we're going to give you your maximum time as much as you can. So, Amy, over to you. I think it's a good time to begin.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm trusting you've all had a lovely lunch and you've got some rest and got some vitamin D and are ready to be spiritually fed in today's AY program. So before we start, we're just going to have a quick word of prayer. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this Sabbath day. We thank you for the opportunity you've given us to meet with each other on Zoom, even though not being physically able to meet at church. We ask that we learn more about you in today's AY program, and we are blessed. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
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 Thank you very much, AY. This, you want to do the music here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful day I will never forget. After I wandered in darkness away, Jesus was Savior I met. Oh, what a tender, compassionate friend, He met the need of my heart. Shadows dispelling with joy, I am telling, He made all the darkness depart. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul, When at the cross my Savior made me whole, My sins were washed away, and my night
Hello.
was turned to day.
I don't know you guys, but I'm being cheeky. I've got a party in the park and I'm dying for the toilet. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I don't outdoor things. I'm thinking, God.
Justified fully through Calvary's love, all understanding is mine. And the transaction so quickly was made, when as a sinner I came. Took the great offer of praise, He did proffer, He saved me, oh praise His dear name. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul, When at the cross my Savior made me whole, My sins were washed away, and my night was turned to day. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul.
Elder, if you have volume on both, you get feedback. Yes, we're glad to be back this afternoon. Thank the AYS indeed for their introduction and music. I would like to introduce a speaker who now needs no introduction, really. We know he is a son of the soil of Ghana, Africa, but he's also a son of the soil of Great Britain. He has lived here for a number of years. He matriculated at Newbold College, and of course, his own flesh and blood is part and parcel of the Hope Community Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Hope New Addington District of Churches. And so, Elder, you are officially a son of the soil.
Thank
So
you.
you're one of us, and we're happy to have you back. We just thank God for how he's set this up. You told us this morning you were due back in Ghana, but because of COVID, of course, having come to see family and do other matters, somehow you are the lamb caught in the thicket of God's circumstance. So we are blessed to be the beneficiaries of God's setup. And we thank you for what we heard this morning. As I introduce you, Elder, this morning I've been thinking all afternoon that this amazing God who created us, and when we, by way of Adam, were in the garden, we had this brain capacity. And it's interesting you're talking about the brain capacity that was second to none. In fact, nobody else has equal the brain power of Adam and his beautiful wife, Eve. I think I observed, and you said to us, their brain was virtually perfect, virtually in complete synchronization with God himself.
Yeah.
They were on the same level throughout. And then we, of course, knew that there was a sin. And I have observed and heard many preachers who've observed in that text just after the fall, the behavior pattern was very familiar to me and to you and to the people who live in this world. It wasn't me, it was her. It wasn't him, me, it was him. And this blame game that we have lived with, it's the Catholics, no, it's the Protestants, it's the Jews, no, it's the Gentiles. Everybody's blaming everybody for everything except themselves. And I figure that shows we're totally out of sync with our great creator, his mind of selflessness, his mind of taking responsibility, his mind of being, as it were, altruistic. He's thinking of others rather than himself. So Elder, it's wonderful that you're going to help us, hopefully, to start handing our minds back to its owner so that we might actually be again in charge of our minds, because we live in a world clearly where, as we often say, can we remind people to mute when you come on? Just tell the people you don't want to go on speaker so that they won't put you on. And finally, Elder, that we often say of each other, has he or she lost his mind?
Yeah.
But actually, maybe we're closer to the truth from what I heard this morning than we've ever realized. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can indeed.
Okay. I think this morning I might have probably ended abruptly because I was given a signal of time, whatever. But basically, to sum up, how does what I said this morning apply to us? And how do we find that manifested amongst us? Let's bring it home to like the church. There is not a single church I have been to, and I've done lectures in the States, Belgium, you name it, all over UK. I've done the camp meeting in 2006. I've done in Ghana. I've crossed the whole terrain. I've been to Nigeria as well, and every time you go anywhere, there is tension in the church, and the question is, if these individuals, us, who claim to come to know God, are still having this mental glitch, I call it, or mental fatigue relating to one another, when we have declared we know God, then we must come to a realization of the impact of that derangement or the deviation from the will of God as a result of sin. And, you know, in medicine, there is medicine for everything, but nobody's come up with the medicine for the mind, because the mind was given to God. It's an attribute of God. But we know the brain, we know the neurons, the synapse, and various electric charges that go through the brain. And so if somebody has probably a weak arm or whatever, they can trace the source from the brain through the nerves and all that. But when the mind is troubled, we can only tell the effects of it on the body. So there is a psychological and a physiological impact. And when you come to the church, you find people come together to do things. But suddenly, some withdraw. There is tension, there's misunderstanding. And it all stems from the fact that we are not fully synchronized. Until Paul says, and I want to do this very quickly, Paul says that in Romans 8, I beg you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Then he asks the question without verbally bringing it out. How can I do this? And he says it is by renewing of the mind, that you may be able to prove that which is good and perfect will of God. Paul sums up the return journey, how we return to God, by the renewing of our minds. And the renewal of your mind will mean that when you don't get on, let's say in the church, Pastor, I don't know whether you have that in your church. Once there are humans, I'm sure you will realize that you have all these things. Well, it doesn't matter which church you go to. You know, the renewal of the mind calls for humility. You know, the Bible says Christ humbled himself and was made like unto us. So the first key principle to our returning to God is the humility. When you humble yourself, it means you've recognized your level of deviation from the path of correctness. So let's say a team has been put together, they're working so well, little tensions, and the tension may not be that severe, but probably you have challenges at home that is affecting the mind. You have challenges at work, it's affecting the mind. The mind, overwhelmed by the challenges from other sources, makes the body so tired. As a result, you'll find sometimes you say, I can't take it anymore. But you're not dying. It means you've come to a point where the mind can no longer contain what is happening to it. And sometimes you find people even crying, people withdraw themselves. And so, and then and not only withdrawing themselves, then they begin to blame, Jane, the last time the way she spoke to me, I didn't like it. You know, she made me feel that. And we based everything on feeling. Now, you may start a good work in God's house, but because we are not fully synchronized, when we are not careful, the devil comes in and we find little tensions. So it's important for us to come to a point of realization that until the mind is renewed, and we cannot do this by ourselves, we need to be constantly seeking after God. But even that is a challenge for the unrenewed mind that is seeking to be renewed, because Philippians tells us that it is God who worketh in you both to will and to do. So all we need is surrender. And in that surrendering, that's where the challenge is. If you don't get on with your family, whether your children, there's tension between mother, father, husband, wife, son and mother, son and daughter, daughter and mother, and all that, because we have differing views. But when it comes to the work of God, I will appeal. When there is tension, whatever the tension is for us to come back and sit, because the renewing of the mind is about agreeing to disagree, but looking at the focus, the main objective and the goal for which we've been chosen to do the work. I was the first elder of my church, is the English church in Ghana. And after 2 years, I told them, sorry, they wanted me to continue. I said, sorry, so I'm not talking about your church. I told them, no, I can't continue, because When we would have met, you go to a meeting, somebody is supposed to speak, feels that, no, I'm not the one to stick my head out. You know, I don't want to be thrown under the bus. So they pull out. And then it appears that you're left on your own. And it creates unnecessary friction. So I said, look, in order not to end up fighting or doing something contrary, I pulled back. So I have the same challenge, you know, and so we need to come to a point where we realize that we need to be going to God constantly. It gets to a point where your body begins to shut down. And you may not appreciate that, but if you find yourself very irritable, you know, it came from Adam saying, God, you're telling me, but I think you know who the problem is, the woman. Irritation, resistance. The woman says the snake. So God starts the punishment from the snake, but God is not here dishing out any punishment. The same thing, your body gets exhausted, and so you throw it out. This is the cause of my problem, you know. And so it's about realizing that when you begin to get little colds, you know, you find you get overly tired and sometimes irritable. And especially when you come to the point of saying, I can't cope. It's not a brain function, it's a mind function. Your mind is churning over so many things, and it's gotten to a point where you're saying, I'm closing down, I'm shutting down shop. I can't go anymore. And so you leave a project for God in which God is working on you. Because anytime we come together to do things for God, it's an avenue for God to bring a bit of ourselves that we don't know to the fore, so that God can use other human agents to help us. So I don't know whether anybody has anything to add to it or a question to ask on that before we move to the health. Hello?
Hello, it's Patience here from New Martington. It's quite interesting, the topic that you've raised, because so many times, especially in a smaller church, sometimes it feels suffocating, you know, when you have to be involved in several different things. And it's just refreshing to hear from you that you also, so as maybe many other people, go through the same thing. And the idea is to just go back to God with it. Because sometimes it does feel overwhelming when you have to be doing so many things and you feel you can't cope. But sometimes you feel guilty. Then if you sort of withdraw, I don't know, how can you deal with this guilt? Because you know it's not right for you and you need a break, but sometimes you feel guilty. How best can you deal with that?
Yeah, let me say that guilt is positive because it's also another indicator of you having a conscience. But let me clarify this point. It's important you know your limit, and when you are exhausted, to speak out. Some of us do what I call the donkey habit. You know, when you go to Egypt, you see a lot of donkeys carrying heavy load. And they will carry it, irrespective of the weight, they will carry it and they will climb the hill. But there comes a time where the donkey stops and it will not move. If you overload your system, you will get to a point at the upward journey and you find you've gone too much. So what you call guilt, sometimes your body may be telling you it's too much, but it's how you do your exit. And when you do your exit, you must come and say, look, brothers and sisters, it's a small church, I've had this, I've got other issues that are equally pressing. I would like to support, but I cannot carry the load. So that you open the matter out. I know we will say that it's not everything you have to say in the church because people tell stories about whatever challenges you're going through. But I'm not saying you come and say everything. But when you feel you can't cope, You have the pastor, you have the elders, you have some sisters and mothers in the church you can confide in. Sometimes you need to just talk to someone, and you'll find what you thought was a burden, that other person can help you overcome it. If you leave and you come to a point of feeling guilt, then you've got to ask yourself, what have I done wrong? The first thing is go to God and say, God, you know why I left this thing, but I'm feeling very funny. Pray about it and listen to God, but don't overload your system. Now, when I told him I wasn't going to be the first elder anymore, the current first elder decided, David, you're not going to go. So he called me and said, David, you should have maintained the old elders platform. I said, no, I'm out of office. I don't want to be a ghost roaming about in town, watching on anybody's shoulders. No. So he then created a new elders platform. And I told him, no, you cannot create two elders committee or elders group. So if you want to do that, then all previous elders from the church started who are alive must be on that platform, because I know why you're creating it, but I don't want to be in control. So he created a new platform with all elders. To be honest with you, most times they put issues on that platform, I'm the last to comment, because I know when I say things, the respect and whatever, but I have refrained from easily charging in. So sometimes when you step back and you're feeling guilty, and there is a way, don't look at the negatives. So if there are weaknesses, had I been there, this would have been sorted. No. But you could contribute in a way of empowering others with your knowledge and experience. I hope I've been able to do justice to it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other thought? Any questions or any additions or subtractions? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
In relation to this morning's session, you talked about the animal and the human being, so far as how they behave.
I
And
didn't get that part.
the behavior between animals and human beings. For example,
Yeah.
we can leave a meeting and say we're fed up, but the animals, they don't have that level of intelligence. Do you think because God breathed, why we behave the way we behave more or less like I don't want to say like gods, because that's probably a dangerous statement, but our behavior is different to that of the human being because God breathed his breath into us. Whereas with animals, it seems like they were called into existence. God did not breathe his breath into them.
No, I read from Genesis chapter 2:19, where God formed the animals from the dust. They went through the same process, but as I said, God endowed man with a bit of himself. Now, the word breath, you're moving into theology now, that word breath, ruha, or spirit, basically means oxygen, the air we breathe. The animals do the same, but in our brains, God added a mind. So the mind we have, dogs don't have it, even though sometimes we train the dogs and they begin to act like us, and they are able to go and pick up your newspaper, because you've kind of, if the newspaper comes at 10 instead of 8, if it goes there at 8 and the newspaper is not out there, it will not say, oh, I think I just saw the newspaper, man, it's 10 o'clock, I'm going to get it. Unless you train it through variable, signals or stimuli, and then it will respond to the stimulus, But God, the reason why there was accountability with Adam is that Adam, as I said, could plan, think it through, work out how he was going to do things, and then carry it out. So when God told Adam, dress it and keep it in the Garden of Eden, God didn't specify what he was to do, whether he was to mow the lawn, there were no lawn mowers, whether he was to pick the fruit from the top of the tree or the ones beneath. God gave him free hands. And when God brought the animals to him for him to name them and also to name Eve, Adam wasn't using his brain, he was using the mind and the capability and the capacity to reason out. And so God had an extension of himself given to Adam. And that's why when they went against the express will of God, they immediately recognized that we've gone out of sync. And that's what the term I use, derangement, or they've gone out of range from the ideal, being able to develop until they became perfectly obedient to the will of God.
Okay, I thought the difference came about when he breathed his breath, and because he didn't do that with the animals, did he? So I thought, but it doesn't matter how the difference came about. But I was just hanging on to the fact that the difference with human beings and the animals came about, in particular in relation to mankind, when God breathed his breath into man.
I guess that's a thought, but that wasn't the direction I was heading. I was more looking at you see, when God gives Adam and Eve responsibility, he had shown how to do things. And because he projected a bit of himself into Adam, and his initial thoughts for creating Adam is that he will look after God's creation. So the dog was part of the creation to be looked after. But Adam comes as a unique being in the likeness and image of God.
Mm.
Thank you. Theologians like...
Sorry, Elder, there's one more hand we have, Mariah.
Yeah.
Yes. Hello, Doctor. Thank you so much.
You can call me Elder.
Thank you, Elder. Thank you, Elder, for the session this morning and for the continuation. For me, I found it really interesting when you were talking about neuroticism and sin, and the way in which sometimes people have anxiety or depression or issues, but yet the professionals that are there to help them are equipped with false theories, you know, and this separation between the existence of God and those things that should help that person have been completely set to one side, and instead they are supposed to be helping themselves by focusing on self, which is almost like perpetuating the issue of sin, because you're saying, okay, I am the one that is there to heal. And so I put a question in the chat earlier, but I don't think you saw it. I wanted to know, how can we help somebody that's suffering from depression? Because I seem to constantly put my foot in it when I'm trying to help somebody that's quite close to me, and she's an amazing person, but I always find myself referring to the Bible or to God's word, and it seems to, and even though she's a Christian, it seems to not help. And yeah, I just wanted some advice with that, please.
Okay, I cannot give a definitive prescriptive mode, because you see, when somebody is depressed, there are so many factors leading to the depression. It could be stress, and the stress, which is the stimuli or stimulus, could be coming from several sources. Some of us do not appreciate the danger of early childhood life. So, you know, in Genesis chapter 4, Cain kills Abel, not because Abel had offended him, but God had accepted Abel's offering. Abel had nothing to do with Cain. That caused God not to answer or accept Cain's. But then, because he had been mentally affected and almost paranoia and schizophrenia, I'll say, he took it out on his brother. Somebody who is depressed, if you go dealing with the depression with the Bible, and you've not been able to unpack the cause of the depression. And depression is a graduation from an uncontrolled and unresolved stress leading to trauma. And the trauma gets to a point where the person loses control. You have to unpack how it came to trauma, how it got to the stressful situation and wasn't dealt with, and what are the triggers. So the Bible is like bashing everything, compressing everything into one. If the person is very close to you and they will open up to you, I think for me, the approach will be being there for the person. I'll tell you a situation about a young man. I've had some challenging times, and going to Africa, sometimes you meet with difficulties and you suffer loss financially and whatever, health and everything. So, but I got close to a few young people because, you know, work was difficult to come by. But I take these young men to my farm and I study with them. On Sabbath, we come, I take them to a place we could eat with one of the sisters who prepare meals. So they call me uncle. But I find that the young man was withdrawing. He wasn't coming to church. So I called him, he said, "Oh, uncle, I'll come." So one day I tracked him and we met, and he said, "You know, things are difficult. My father left us in a house he hadn't paid the mortgage, and he stopped. He never told anybody. So the bank was coming in for repossession." And I asked him, "Have you seen the lawyer?" and all that. So we discussed that. Not that I had money to give him, but I said, "Okay, let's pray, but try and get a lawyer and see if he could do a pro bono. In other words, he will be lenient to listen to your case and advise and all that. And then probably through the lawyer, he will be able to write a reasonable letter to the bank to give you time to sort yourself out, to see how you raise the money, rather than saying, look, for 2-3 years, he's not been paid. We've written," and the letter goes to his father who had left the home. So, and he wasn't communicating. So as we spoke, he said, "Okay, I'll try. I think I know this lawyer." I said, "Go talk to him. We'll pray." The lawyer listened. He started writing letters for him. But he was also out of a job. He hasn't got a job. He's an engineer, no job. So I took him to the farm one day, and he sat quiet from, let's say we left Accra going to Birmingham. He sat in the car very quiet. And this is somebody who every second is can't stop. So we went to the farm, we looked at the farm, we did a few things. He would say a few words. On our way back, I said to him, "Young man, I know the feeling. I've been there. When things fell apart and I couldn't control, I had no control over it, over anything. It felt like I was losing it. But you know, God has been good. It's bad, but I'm alive. And I can take you out. And I believe God put me through this experience so I can be there to listen to you and share my own experience with you." He burst out in tears. He cried, shaking. Because I told him, his name is P. I told him, "I think there's something troubling the mind." And he said, "Yes, uncle, you know, I've seen the lawyer, I've done this, but it seems doesn't work. And what annoys me is that you call daddy, he's not responding. And he's placed us in this difficult situation." So finally, he told me all the stories. I happen to know that lawyer. I called him, I greeted him. I said, "Have you seen this young man?" He said, "Oh, yeah. I'm going to deal with the matter." So he wrote the letters and appealed to the bank. He knew the law around payments and all that. And he reasoned out with the bank. And a mortgage of about, let's say, 120,000 was reduced to 30,000 for them to pay in 3 months. And so they were able to get put a few sums of money together, and they cleared it. Now you see the guy is bubbling. I'm not saying that is the sole answer, but my experience with somebody who was going through that is, I prayed with him, but I said, let's look at what the trigger points are. And if the person is very close to you, it will take them a struggle, but gradually they will open up to you. When they feel safe, they believe they can share. And as they share, don't tell them, "Oh, I know." Yes, you listen. And then gradually, when you feel comfortable, you feel they are now comfortable, then you pray silently whilst you give them some positive feedback and some possible route to take. So it's not a one solution fix all. You got to ask God for wisdom to see these people, but also you must come to a point where you realize that at this point is beyond my borders. I cannot be the sole person helping this person. Fortunately, in this part of the world, you have counselors, you have Citizens Advice Bureau, you have all kind of advice systems here. And yes, some of them don't subscribe to the Christian principle, but if a part of what they do can help them unpack the challenge, then you combine that. And by God's grace, the person, it should work out. But it takes time, and it takes commitment on your part and sacrifice to be there constantly. If it means cooking for them, if it means helping them even with their laundry, things that we call activities of daily living that you find that people neglect, you can be there helping them in that way.
Thank you, Elder.
Okay.
Some other
We've
hands.
got two more hands, Paulette and Amy. So Paulette, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay, sure. So thank you for this talk, Elder Addo. It's really interesting. I was kind of here this morning, kind of not, because I was elsewhere helping someone, so I didn't get all of what you said. So I'm just kind of going on from the last few comments that were made. And I was thinking that when we are ill, physically unwell, we are quite happy to go to the doctors for help. And I still feel that as Christians, as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, when we have a problem with the mind, or when people have a problem with the mind, there almost seems to be this idea of you don't need to go and get any help, just pray up. And I do believe in the power of prayer, and I do believe that God does the healing, but he also uses us as instruments. And so I was just thinking about what Mariah was just saying when she at times is with a friend who's struggling with mental health challenges and is not quite always sure what to do. And I was just thinking, my area of work is with young people who suffer with mental health difficulties. And one of the things in terms of depression, from one of the models that we use, is that we don't underestimate the power of the social network and people just being alongside people when they're unwell, just letting them know that they are available, they're not alone, and just offering that support in the way that you just described you did with this young man. And often, for example, when I'm working with young people, I may not be able to sit and do a prayer with them because that's not what I'm expected to do within the workplace. But what I what I will always do is say, Lord, as I'm working with this young person, help me to find a way of helping. And so what we are doing is we're making ourselves instruments and being willing and available, and God can use us to be useful and helpful in these situations. And all of us, when we encounter people that are struggling, can just be there, just people knowing that they're not alone and they're not struggling on their own, and there's somebody that cares and there's somebody that just wants to be a support, will go a long way in helping that individual. So just wanted to add that, really.
Thank you very much. I think you're perfectly right, and it's important, as I said, that we recognize our boundaries. In my practice as a naturopath, I'm into naturopathic medicine. I know my boundaries, where my learning and experience ends. As a naturopath, I am in the chronic domain. I am not an acute person, even though I deal with people with very severe, challenging conditions. But acute conditions are high trauma situations. So if somebody has had an accident, you don't bring them to me. You take them to the hospital. They need to be stabilized. They need to be given the right support. When they've been stabilized and now they have aches and pains and a few challenges, then you do it. And whilst here, I work with two local authorities and I worked for Lambeth and Sadok. I was head of adult providers, and I had mental health, and I had day services, respite. We had mind. We had a few others. I worked with the Maudsley and all that. And at the time, we had Dr. Olajide. He was one of the leading consultants, and from Nigeria, but he's lived here most of his life. And I said to him, as a people, we have a belief system. This system doesn't seem to recognize that. And then we have our cultural nuances that takes us out of the domain of the Western socialization and what I call the human dynamics. So there was a case that I challenged the consultant, and it became a case review because they said, look, this guy comes in, he doesn't know anything about mental health, and he's challenged the consultant. There was a Nigerian lady who had, in Nigeria, they wrap everything around themselves, the ladies, and they put the woman in a dress. So when initially, a few weeks after she was sent to the nursing home or the residential home just to give the family respite, she started pulling the tablecloth and wrapping them around her, tying her head. And so they called a case review, and I happened to be the lead officer. So I was invited to the meeting. And immediately they came, they said her behavioral pattern has changed and we need to look at the medication. And I told the guy, are you out of your mind? I don't know where that came from. And everybody froze. I said, you've missed a critical point. This woman is from Nigeria. Let me show you a few pictures of Nigerian women. They use wrappers. They don't use dress. As far as she's concerned, she's wearing an undergirdle or an underskirt. They have a thing they put under, and then they wrap around. So she's doing what is very, very normal. The only difference is that she can't tell the colors, because if you put white, that was what was available. She used it. And so if you go ahead and you change the medication, you've created a problem. So oftentimes in dealing with, in your work, you'll find you meet people from different cultural backgrounds and all that. And even in the church, when we're dealing with people who have challenges, the Caribbean will respond differently to the African. The African from the West has a different behavior to the African from the East, the South, and the North. And even our interpretation of the gospel sometimes is overlaid by our cultural nuances and diversity. And sometimes that even creates tension. And so if you go to help somebody who has depression, who has a challenge, and you're not appreciative of these nuances, with all the good intention, you may be hitting the wrong target. That's why it's good we come together and be more exposed one to another as the children of God. But you're doing great. You pray, God gives you wisdom as you approach these individuals. And so keep doing that. But in the church, when we're working, we must appreciate the diversity within us and call on all the energies within the system to support when there is a challenge.
I see one more hand, Elder.
Yeah, hi Elder. Just a question from this morning's presentation. You said that when Adam and Eve sinned, they became schizophrenic and they didn't maintain good hygiene. I was just wondering where you got that from.
Very interesting question.
It's a good. That means you were listening. I'm glad you were listening. I didn't say you should maintain good hygiene. What I was trying to say, at that point I was rushing. What I was trying to say is that when somebody is schizophrenic, some of the symptoms of schizophrenia is fatigue and paranoia. They don't look after themselves. When you're depressed, you don't do that. But I was kind of liking that the fact that when they lost their cladding, the dress, which was the Spirit of God covering them, all they could find, they could have gone back to God and said, we've lost it, because God was coming to them. But instead, they kept hiding, the symptoms we find when people are depressed. When God finally found them, they had picked a few leaves and wrapped themselves. It was perfectly normal to them. So I'm only linking that to behavioral patterns, that when people are depressed, they do strange things. But there are other symptoms.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. But thank you very much. Thank you. Am I ready to roll?
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. I said we should read Leviticus chapter 17. Leviticus chapter 17. Leviticus 3:17. The Bible says, and when you go through the scriptures, it's a book of psychology, it's a book of chemistry, it's a book of physics, it's a book of maths, it's a book of astrophysics, it's a book of astronomy, it's a book of medicine, engineering, you name it. Every aspect in human existence, the Bible clearly understood has an application. Leviticus 3:17 says, if you read the whole chapter, it talks about the sacrifices, and God talks about which part to use and which part not to use. It talks about taking the fat out, the kidneys, and a few parts, and the brain and all the rest. And it says the fat should be used when you read 15, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is upon them, which is by the flanks and the caul above the liver, with the kidney, it shall he take away. That's the priest and the high priest. And the priest shall burn them upon the altar. It is the food of the offering made by fire for a sweet savor. All the fat is the Lord's. Then verse 16, last part, all the fat is the Lord's. It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood. You see, this was said 6,000 years ago. But now doctors are telling us, or scientists, medical scientists are telling us that too much fat in your blood is a problem. Too much what we call triglycerides. And triglycerides is fat, but its original source is from the sugars you take, either from your soft drinks, your enhanced juices, the sugary stuff. They are converted into triglyceride, which are injurious or which damage the body. Now, what is the source? Where do we get fat from? They don't sell fat at Tesco's or Sainsbury's or Waitrose, so you go and buy fat. Where do we get the fat from? Any responses quickly?
Vegetables, nuts, seeds, or some people have animal.
Or some people have.
Some people use animal fat. I don't, by the way, but then I would say vegetables, nuts, seeds. So avocado oil is a fat, or coconut oil is a fat. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this opens up to the good ones and the bad ones. But the one that God is talking about is animal source, where he says, take them and the fats from the animal, it's mine, burn them. Right from the beginning, God has been very clear as to what will harm us. So he says, take the fat out. But can you really take all the fat out of the animal? As a little boy, I was a shepherd and I used to slaughter the goats and the sheep. And when you open them up, or even when you buy your chicken here, you'll find as you're cleaning them, there is fat on the tissue. And then we take them out. And we've been told that, oh, the skin has a fat layer. So when you take it out, you've taken all the fat out. That's one big lie.
Mm.
The greatest volume of fat is in the muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Because every cell in your body has a fat element in the nucleus, so that the body is able to deal with the fat-soluble vitamins as well as deal with the hormones that run to the fat. So if you take a muscle, which is made of millions of cells, it is loaded with fat.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot extract all. To try that, you take all the fat out and then cut the meat or the chicken or whatever it is into small bits, add water to it, put it on the fire, and let it simmer for a while. And you'll see on top of that liquid solution you have, it's covered. Pour the water and put it in the refrigerator and see the volume of fat that will come to it. So if you watch the sanctuary services, the animals that they kill, most times the priest boiled the meat. When you boil it, what happens? Water and fat don't mix. So it is separated. The reason why God said we should not take the fat is that when your blood is gooey, full of fat, it is not able to attach enough minerals and nutrients. It is not also able to travel smoothly through the blood vessels. So you are not feeding yourself. You're slowly committing suicide. Not only that, without oxygen, your cells reduce, the shelf life of your cells become reduced. But because fat and oils have high calories, the thing with calories is that they have what we call blockers. So your body has what we call insulin receptors or sugar docking sites. So when you eat and the food is broken down and becomes sugar, as it's being carried by the insulin to go to the cell, the calories go and pack in front of the entrance to the cell. So they block the docking sites. As a result of that blockage, the insulin goes and it has no docking site. So it goes, bounces back, and it floats in the system. So you have oversaturation of blood in your system, of sugar, in your system. Now, the brain is so intelligent and clever that when there's too much sugar, it doesn't want that. So what it does is that it sends a signal that it must be taken to the weakest points and the extreme ends of the body. And if your blood is gooey and saturated with fat, it doesn't even, the heart struggles to even pump them to your extremities. So that's why as you begin to pile on the weight and you become cuddly, you find gradually you would have developed more blood vessels. The heart remains the same, but it means the blood has to travel a longer distance to get to the extreme end. So you'll find people begin to have cold extremities. But without the proper circulation and then high sugar, which is dumped there, and it takes time for the heart to pump to get a full cycle, the cells begin to die. And that's why people develop diabetes, type 2. Secondly, the tissues are intoxicated with sugar, and sugar is killing the cells. So you find that a time comes when the tissues are dead, and then you develop gangrene. The cells begin to die. It becomes a sore. It will not heal because of poor circulation and all that. Secondly, the source of the animal fat, which God says should be given to him, it's protein, the meat, the chicken, and all the others in the line. Now, most people do not chew their food properly. They swallow. We are like vipers and pythons and cobras. So when I go out to places, like if I'd come to the church and you're eating, you find me walking about and saying hi to people, but I'm actually looking to see how people gobble up their food. You know, most of us don't chew. So the meat you ate today, for example, I know you're all good people, you're all vegetarians, and you eat the right stuff. But the meat, those who didn't eat meat, because you swallowed it, the meat you've put into your stomach today, next Sabbath, the following Wednesday, that meat still will be lying in your stomach. And it will be rot, start the process of putrefaction. It will start getting rotten. And so when you drink your water, you wash that filth into your bloodstream. You're giving your liver so much stress because it has to filter. And then the liver will take it and pass it on to the kidney. What makes that process more difficult is that because there is this piece of material in your stomach, your body begins to pump hydrochloric acid because protein is digested by acid and a few digestive enzymes. A bit of starch is digested in the pancreas, but the acid that is laden in the stomach is passed into the blood. God designed that our blood will be alkaline. That's why he prescribed the food in Genesis. And you find when it comes to the nuts and seeds, he made it in such a way that to get an almond, you got to work, you got to crack it. To eat coconut, you've got to crack it. But to get the juice, there is a little hole. If you have even a piece of stick, you can just poke it and open it and drink the juice. So the things that we have to work hard, even in the natural ones, when it comes to fats and oils, God gave us a clue as to how we approach it. If you've got to work hard to get to it, then you've got to stop. But interestingly enough, these days they do it before it comes to us. So most of us haven't even seen some of the nuts before, how it is in its original state. So we see them having been packaged, so we eat them. But if you go back and study, most of them you've got to use, coming Christmas, you see they bring the nuts in their original shells, and you've got to buy that cracker to break it. So imagine that equipment wasn't there. You've got to get a stone and whack it before you break it. So the acid is washed into the bloodstream. When you eat the high protein food, meat, for example, contains a bit of sulfur. Hydrochloric acid, the body can adjust it and balance it, but contains a bit of sulfur. It attaches itself to the hydrogen in the hydrochloric acid, thereby creating partial sulfuric acid, which is slightly acidic, stronger, but also too much acid in the stomach also is not good because it begins to irritate the fine surface lining of your stomach. And then as the acid builds up and there's rottenness, the gas comes to the top. And then once in a while you hear bloop, you belch. There is a valve here. It's supposed to open down. But with the force of the acid, it comes, bloop, opens up. So you begin to weaken the neck, the locker. And gradually over time, people develop hiatus hernia, the weakness of the valve joint here. So the least thing, you're belching. Anything goes, even when you drink water, you know, and it's very painful and it burns. And with so much acid, we say we have heartburn. If your heart starts burning, you will drop it. It's not heartburn. It's a gas in your stomach that is causing the burning of the valve, the sensation. Because the heart is here, we call it heartburn. But coming back to the acid, when the acid gets into the bloodstream, just as it will irritate the fine surface lining of the stomach, it also begins to irritate the fine surface lining of your blood vessels. Now, I don't have any, well, I have hair here. If you have, ladies, if you have hair, the non-natural one, take a strand and hold it, stretch your hands out and hold the hair. If I told you some blood vessels in your brain is that size, and then you have the fine surface lining irritated to the point that there are little lacerations. That is when cholesterol kicks in. Cholesterol is very good for the body. God designed our bodies so that 80% of our cholesterol requirement is endogenous. It is produced by the liver. The 20% from outside creates more problems. And if you go to school, you get 80%. You are good as gold. But the ones we add. So once the surface lining of the blood vessels becomes irritated and lacerated, the cholesterol comes. And if this is the blood vessel, your brain gives a signal. Stop it before it bursts. Because if it's in your head and it's irritated and it's opening, when it breaks, you have a stroke. If it's around the wall of the heart, because the heart muscle also have blood vessels feeding it to keep it alive. So if the surface lining become irritated, cholesterol goes and then pack it. It packs it, so now you have a slightly narrow blood vessel. Yeah, if this is it, and then this place, it's narrow. Can you see it? Then if the top part also is irritated, then another one comes there. And before you realize, you have this, the narrowing of the blood vessels. This then places pressure on the adjoining or the vessel before, because the heart is constantly pumping. So you then develop an aneurysm, the ballooning of the blood vessel wall. Are you with me? Are you following?
Yeah.
Right? So with just one activity gone wrong, one, you have irritation, the stripping away, cholesterol piling it. From the same source of food, you have high calorie blocking your sugar from being absorbed. So you have saturation of sugar in the blood. Gradually, certain parts of the body begins to suffer. If it's around the heart and you develop the aneurysm, which is the, so the pressure is building, but the blood can't go through. So this place balloons out. By ballooning out, it will explode because the pressure is building, If it's in the brain, sometimes people suffer what we call an infarct. If it's several multi-infarct aneurysm, and then it leads to early dementia because certain parts of the body, the brain is damaged. Now, when the body is overly acidic too, the brain sends a signal, I am struggling, I don't want no acid up here. You got to make sure you screen everything and give me an alkaline blood so I can give instructions, as I'll sacrifice some of you. And the brain is good at that. If you abuse your body and it's getting to the brain, it will decide for you. It will sacrifice. So for example, it says push the sugar away from me. It goes to the extremities and it pushes it to the eye. And that's how diabetics, the oversaturation of sugar begins to damage the nerves and the tissues in the eye, and they go blind. Or else neuropathy, the nerves becomes intoxicated with sugar, and then the tissues begin to die. So you could walk on fire, you could have a sore foot or toe falling off. Unless you look at it, you wouldn't know. By the time you realize half of your foot is gone, literally eaten away. Then the over-acidification of the blood, the brain calls for SOS signal, and it says neutralize, neutralize. The only chemical in the blood for neutralization is calcium. And where is calcium stored?
Bones.
In the bones and the teeth. And so you force your body to leach calcium from the bones. And that's how you lose your bone density. You can't maintain the calcium. So you could be taking your calcium tablet, you can take your vitamin D and phosphorus tablets that help vitamin Z absorption, alkaline phosphate, which helps the balance of the calcium, all that. But if you are putting in that which is extracting, it's like going into a fight every evening, and you know you have your paracetamol and your brufen. So you go have a little fight, you get injured, you have pain in your body, you come home, you pop the pill, the next day you go. One of these days, somebody throws a blow, your teeth will come out. That's exactly what we do to ourselves. But it's because we do not understand this process that just by eating a piece of meat not chewed properly, we're creating a lot of problems for ourselves. And you know, as we also, meat goes very well with fat and salt. With fat and salt. When meat is nice, it's got heat in it, it's got fat, it's got salt, and you can add your peppers and all that. But with pepper, because it's addictive, the dead, what do you call it? Blood and all the hormones and here to, you know, the animals are fed with antibiotics, growth hormones, and a few things, you know, chemicals, painkillers and all that. And so we are ingesting all these things. And that's why when infections come, our bodies are not able to withstand, because we've already ingested some of these chemicals into our bodies. And the little pathogens or disease-forming microbes in the body have gotten used to these things, and they've adapted and created new ways of existing in the system. So when their cousins enter, the body breaks down. So let me go over. You shall not eat any fat or blood. The source of fat and blood is from our meat, animal source. And the animal source has high calorie, which blocks the insulin receptors or the sugar docking sites for the cells to get the sugar to fire them. Not only that, the same thing has high acid, which affects our bones and joints. The fat, when it's too much, your body is not able to hold oxygen, and oxygen is nutrition. And therefore, you begin to starve your body. The cells have a shorter shelf life. Not only that, other vital nutrients take longer periods. The heart is put under pressure, you develop high blood pressure. And so when you're given the medication in the hospital, the medication works with the brain to tell the heart, instead of going dub, 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 it goes dub, 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 dub. That's why they tell you it's a marriage vow you take when you start taking those medications. Till death do us part, because it's not dealing with the blood pressure, it's managing it. It becomes a chronic condition. In my field, you have to find the cause of the problem. So you've developed that diabetes, you've got high blood pressure, you've got low bone density, you have sight problems, you have gangrene, you have, another thing is that you've got cholesterol blocking the arterial walls. Your cells are not being fed where the patch is landed. The worst part is that most of these animal foods too don't have fiber. And fiber is your sponge that helps clean the gut system. And so when you eat these things without the fiber, it's like you're literally mixing concrete, stones, sand, cement, waterproofing. You know, Brother Mark used damp proofing. You know, they drill the hole, then they put a plastic thing and they push it in to hold the thing. You mix that and you ingest it. As it gets into from the stomach to the duodenum into the small intestines, it's a concrete mix. And you know, when you fall on the concrete, broken concrete, it's rough, it's hard, it cuts. So as this hard waste material goes through your gut system, it literally scratches the surface, causing lacerations. You begin to develop ulcers. And you know, most diseases, pardon me, most diseases that afflict us are what we call opportunistic. So he's waiting there. We all have disease-forming microbes in our body, just that our immunity is strong, so it keeps them at bay. But they watch him. The Bible says the thief cometh to steal and to kill, but I have come that they might have life. But in this case, you have introduced the thief into your body. And as they go through the system and they create lacerations, these bacteria and pathogens go there and start feasting on your tissues. Feasting. So you develop all kind of ulcers. The ulcers not taken care of. There is more than enough evidence that too much protein, high protein, which is animal source, leads to what we call colorectal cancers. Because you see, this disease is also like acid medium. And in an acid medium, there is less oxygen. So you give room for a myriads of diseases to afflict you. And unless when you go to the hospital or to see your GP has this knowledge and begin to explore. But you see, that's not their training. Their training is that a condition and a tablet, condition, a capsule. If a condition cannot be seen, they say, go draw blood. They check your urine, they check that. And then if they say, well, we can't see anything, they send you to the consultant. The consultant will refer you to the butcher. Sorry for using that, to the surgeon. The surgeon has to open you up to see what is going on. And sometimes when they open the mess in there, they just patch you up and wish you a good day. Tell you they try, some don't come back. But we inflict ourselves by a very little process. Now, what I'm saying to you, I've been through it. When I was at Newport, I just come from Africa, and I had to struggle to get my flight and everything, and had to work all hours. And I became sick. I got operated upon because I was working at McDonald's, and McDonald's, big chunky processed meat and white bread. You put the gherkins on it and the tartar sauce. Nothing. A lot of fat and salt. And so when you work late in the evenings, you have a lot. You've not been to the cafeteria because you're working. So Pastor Bennett, when you don't see me, the cafeteria, that was what I was doing. I was eating that and I got bunked up. I had to be operated upon at Ascot Hospital, but I didn't have this knowledge. Now that I know it wasn't because somebody didn't like me or some spirit was chasing me. I was inflicting myself, self-inflicted pain. I was introducing disease into my system. Anybody wants to say something?
Yeah. I was hoping we will now get some questions with what
Okay, yeah. So I think I've said enough, and if anybody has questions, they can ask.
And you've covered the ground, so I think let me start the ball rolling. If I've already done whatever you've just said about the blood, how do I start clearing that problem that will, if it keeps going, it will block, and then it'll stop the sites from getting sugars at the right place, nutrition, all the things you've said. How do I reverse that? Let's say I want, from now on, I said, you know what, that's a problem waiting to happen. I want to go back. Is there a way back?
Yes, there's a way back. But please listen very carefully to what I'm saying. Whatever I tell you doesn't detract from the fact that you've got to see your GP. I want you to hear that very clearly. Your doctors have skills trained to address key issues. So whatever I'm going to talk to you about, please don't take it as the final solution. I have, in the Adventist world, we have what we call New Start, and I'm sure you all know it. How many? I believe we've all heard about New Start.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I don't work with New Start. I work with news. We say good news. I work with news, nutrition, exercise, water, and stress management. And what I've just described, I didn't even add inflammations and stuff. What I've just described is stress, but internal stress, which medical science don't talk about. So we will have to go back and look at your nutrition. And for me, nutrition is not just eating. Nutrition is a careful selection of items of food, selection of food items that, when brought together, will not only help the body, but that my body will use less energy, but derive the required nutrients. And so we have to go through a plan. And part of it is you will have to use your nutrition to clean your system. And the food items that you will use in terms of your vegetables, fruits, nuts, and grains are such that they'll be digested. Our bodies have two equipments. The blender and the stomach is the juicer, where it extracts the juice. The grinders are the blender, they break down. We have to look at your eating habits, eating patterns, how you combine your food, what times you eat it, how you mix, the mixing of the food, the preparation and all that. Then we have a plan. Exercise, some people believe we got to run. I believe Adam wasn't asked to run, he was asked to walk through the garden. Or you can do, I developed a tension exercise, whereby you use tension to cause the muscles to expand and contract. And if you do it for a while, you'll find you get very exhausted. Or some people call them stretches, but mine, you tense them yourselves. Probably before we get to the end, I'll ask you to do 1 or 2 examples. And then water. Water is not just for drinking, but water on the outside is equally important to clean the filth that comes through the reverse osmosis, the sweating. You know, even if you don't get the water coming out, you still sweat. So you got to wash the skin and get the pores, and using the sponge, you know, to do that. Also, water on the outside, we use hydrotherapy, where we use cold and hot, or just cold compress or warm compress to enhance circulation. And then when it comes to stress, that's where we look at conflict resolution, your ability to deal with internal stress and external stress, your rest as opposed to your sleep pattern. Poor hydration results in stress on the system. So I have a program that I normally will introduce to people. And if you look at Daniel 1:8, the Bible says, Daniel asked the head of the king's guards who were looking after them to give him pulses, vegetables, and water for 10 days. After the trial, if things are going bad for them, then he can take them off. There's a 10-day program you can follow, and you can do it in the comfort of your own home. And if you do it, you come to a realization that your energy is coming back. And even sometimes people who have depression, people who have pain and all that, when you begin to do that and you do the gentle exercises, you'll find you begin to build up energy. I'm not avoiding the question. What I don't want to do is to prescribe so that no one will say that this is it. So if you have any challenge, we can do it on a one-on-one. But in public, it will be remiss on my part to say, if it's diabetes, take that. If it's this. But these are the principles. And when I consult, I use that. I've worked with a lady, probably if I throw in a testimony, who had a tumor in the brain and had water retention. So she had what we call hydrocephalus. She's had 3 surgeries in the hospital, and the doctors felt they've done all they could for her. So she should go to India. And then she was referred to my clinic in Ghana. And I use this principle. And the stress management is what I call the psychology of health. You've got to build hope in the person that they will be well. And if they build that, the mind has a power of helping you hold on to life. And within 18 months, all problem resolved. When she came, she couldn't see properly. She had constant headache, stiff neck, dizziness all the time. It started going slowly. Within 3 months, the headache and the dizziness had gone down. The walking has improved, but she couldn't go heights. After 4 flights of stairs, she was dizzy. She couldn't do that. But by the year, she had improved. But normally when people have conditions, chronic conditions, I tell them it didn't take a day or two to happen. So we've got to work for about 18 months. And within the 18 months, she went back to work. And this is since 2014. And she's still at work. She's been going for a regular yearly checks, and no development of the tumor. Everything, by God's grace, is doing well.
Other questions?
Pastor, I hope I've done justice to the point.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
There's hope. That's what you've told me. Yes, I got that. Either unmute yourself or raise your hand if you have questions. There's a hand there, yeah. Go ahead. Yes, Maurice.
Sorry, that was Mariah. Mariah, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. Apologies if this has already been touched upon, because I had to deal with my little one, so I missed about 10 or 15 minutes of this. But my parents, or my mum rather, she has type 2 and high blood pressure. And at one stage, I was looking after my mum and dad when my dad was ill. And because I eat a plant-based diet, it was when I was cooking for them, they accepted, the sorts of foods that I was preparing for them much more. And I noticed a very significant increase in their health.
I can't hear you. If you could come closer to the mic, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, slightly better.
I think I'll turn this off as well. So I noticed a distinct improvement in their readings, to like in their blood pressure and things like this, as I was doing as I was cooking the sorts of things I would do for myself. So everything's plant-based and actually not much in the way of refined foods, so it's whole foods and stuff. But they've gone back to eating what they wish now, which involves some fish and quite a bit of meat and stuff like that. And I just wanted to hear somebody else's opinion, because I feel as though if they were to continue a plant-based diet, then there is the potential for my mum's type 2 to be reversed.
That's a big bag. Wow.
Do you think that's also the case, or is that just, are there many more complex issues that need to be taken into account?
Okay, if I heard you correctly, your parents had type 2 diabetes and blood pressure, and you being a vegetarian, you started introducing them to the natural foods, and as a result, you found some improvement in their health.
Yeah, in their health, yes.
However, they got tired of you, and they felt that's. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you now.
All right. Okay. So if everybody can mute, I'll appreciate that. So as you started giving them the natural foods, they started healing. You know why? Because you see, the foods that God gave us don't have high calories in them. You know, oftentimes they will take, for example, potato and tell you it has high glycemic index. You know, when science come up with these terms, they frighten all of us. The day the foods that God gave us become a cause for disease, God ceases to be God. But because he will forever remain God, whatever he gave us rightly used will always keep us healthy. And what you were doing was right. The fact is that meat, chicken, and all those things are very addictive, highly addictive, like nicotine, like cocaine, like the amphetamines and the drugs. It's very difficult to kick the habit. So when you're doing the foods for these people, sometimes it's good you come to a point of helping them detoxify. And that's why I put together the juicing regime. If you're Caribbean, you have this food we call pea soup, which has a lot of parsnip, turnips, carrots, sweet potato. The only thing that spoils that food is sometimes it's awash with, you know, oxtail and meat and stuff like that. But if you know how to cook it and you keep the ingredients very few and make it more watery and even blend the ingredients so it becomes very watery, it's high in nutrients, very nourishing and very filling, has the fiber and everything in it. And sometimes if people are complaining and they're from the Caribbean, I put them on the pea soup or lentil soup. You don't put a lot of lentils, but it has the flavor, the seasoning, the herbs, not the seasoning, the herbs, you know, and you use your Himalayans, Celtic or sea salt and all that in small quantities. You know, if you give them that, and then when you prepare the food, I'm not saying you can't cook, oftentimes people struggle to eat this thing called greens and vegetables. And so you've got to have the knack of preparing it that when it touches the palate, remember they've reversed the palate. Where it's supposed to be salt, they have sugar. Where it's supposed to be sugar, they have salt. Where it's supposed to be neutral, they have fats and oils. So when they put it in your mouth, the brain is looking for those signals, but it's not there. So you've got to also work with the people to gradually come to appreciate the benefit. You must always sell the benefit and work with them. But, you know, when people get to a certain age, you look young, but at a certain age, people get tired of suffering. So sometimes they say, look, leave us alone. But I guess patiently work with them. And if they can do, let's say, even one day a week, do the natural stuff, and then you reduce the portion of the other stuff they're eating, but still increase the natural stuff. So they have a bit of it, but a lot of the natural stuff. And if they space it out every 3 days, you wean them slowly. You know, if you take it off completely, they get withdrawal syndrome, you know, and so they are edging for it. So you work with people slowly. Like we said this morning, God is working on us. We are being saved. You know, our characters and attributes and attitudes are gradually changing. But it's important that you work with them. Don't give up. If they stick to the old ways, obviously those things will come back because it's a lifestyle condition. And if you create the situation for the disease, it will definitely come back. It's not gone. What is happening is that you've been able to stop it from deteriorating. Let me explain. If you go to the airport, the plane loads the passengers. It taxis, speeds off the runway, lifts off. It doesn't continue lifting. It comes to a point, it's gone high enough, it plateaus. Then it glides in the air for a while before the pilot will tell you, you can now unlock your seatbelts. But the flight is not ended. It has to go through the air pockets, the turbulence in the up there, that sometimes you have to lock your seatbelt back, you know, engage your seatbelts. And then the pilot must be able to land the plane safely. Landing the plane is making sure it doesn't nosedive, the tail doesn't hit the ground, but the wheels have a way of touching down. The difference between the rear wheels and the front wheels are measured so that it doesn't have the nose up or the nose down. And then it taxis at a speed and being able to apply the brakes so that it doesn't do a 360 twirling till it reduces the speed, and until it comes to the park where the exit is connected to the walkway into the immigration office, you've not completed your journey. It's the same thing. So when you start something slowly before you hit the runway and we take them off, that's where people struggle. They go up a bit and they ask, but how long? Are we not there yet? Are we there yet? Like children always ask. And if they're not able to do that, they have a nosedive. And a nosedive means that the journey is terminated prematurely.
Thank you, Elder.
You're welcome.
Any more questions, health questions? And we're coming to that
a
time.
question, please?
Go ahead.
David?
Hello.
My husband has Alzheimer's. He's gone from tolerating, one for a better word, eating various styles of food to just one at the moment. And he eats a lot of grapes, a lot of tangerines and apples and bananas. But in between that, everything else that he eats has to be sweet or he doesn't want it. And I'm fighting with him because I know what's wrong with him, and all that sweet stuff that he's eating is, I don't want him to get diabetes. What do you suggest that I can do to kind of level the playing field, so to speak?
Will he take a juice?
Oh, he
the
takes
grapes?
juice. He
Okay.
takes juice.
Can we talk off air? Because as I said, I don't want to prescribe on air because each person's situation is different. But the question
Right,
I'll ask,
okay.
you can juice the grapes and stuff. There are other things you could start introducing in small quantities in a very clever way so that he gets adequate nutrition. Else you'll find either he puts on weight unnecessarily or he may lose weight and lose muscle and tissue because he's not feeding, and that will also compound the problem with the brain. So the nerve system. So if we can talk, but adequate nutrition is critical. Adequate nutrition. And he goes for a walk. You go for a walk with him?
No. When I take him for a walk, we'll walk for about 5-10 minutes, and then he'll turn back and say to you, his legs are hurting him.
Fine. So do the 10 minutes every other day slowly till he can do 12 minutes. You know, the Bible says, here is the patience of the saints.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything the Bible has, Jesus says, he who endures to the end. So sometimes patient endurance. I know what it is. When I'm looking after sick people, when, let's say, a family brings a member or relations bring a member of the family who is sick. For example, I had a stroke patient. They just got married, 37, and the man, atomic physicist, was struck down with a stroke. When they brought the man, they carried the man into the clinic, put him on the couch. I took his wife away to another consulting room. And I said to her, I need you in this transaction. And the help I need from you is that all your anxiety, all your care, put it on me. I want you to go back and think of the days of excitement before you guys got married. The things that makes him laugh, giggle, and joke. You know why? Because your facial expression tells him the state of his health. So normally when I'm working with church folks and they're doing hospital visitation, I tell them, if you can't take the heat and you go there with your eyes red, bloodshot, and tear-filled, don't go. And don't go praying, commanding God to come down. You know, God, unless you intervene, you're killing the person. It's called psychology of health. when you go to the hospital, the person is already struggling, suffering, in pain. It's not for you to say, oh, Jesus, help him. All that you're saying, the person is looking at your face and it's a boy, I'm in a bad state. They give up because they're gone. And so I took the lady aside. I worked with the mind of the carer. And oftentimes, those who care have double jeopardy. You have a vested interest in the person who is sick. You are emotionally attached. Your activities around the person is stressful. And oftentimes you neglect yourself. And oftentimes it ends up that the carer goes down before the one who's actually sick. And so I tell anyone who is caring for a sick person, you got to find your exit triggers. When I say exit, when it gets too much, do you have somebody you can talk to? Somebody you can share some of your anxiety? It's not a crime if you're looking after the sick person, probably go out for a meal. That's what you do here. Don't worry about anybody saying, oh, the husband is sick, the wife is sick, and look at him sitting with friends, laughing. No, it's therapy for you because the pressure is so high. So it's good sometimes you can go out, free yourself of the tension, and then you come back and re-engage. Because a sick person is also very often an angry person. They find they are limited, they are frustrated, and sometimes they take it out on you. Not intentionally, but because of their limitation, things they could easily do, they can't do. And when they say, oh, bring it, probably the myriads of things you've got to do, delays for them, they want it now. But there are processes you've got to go through. And so they get angry and they throw it in your face. You've got to find an outlet of venting out this. And then when you come back, you've recharged your system. It's respite. You need respite so that you can free yourself and continue caring. So if you're caring for somebody who is unwell, please be very careful yourself because the cost oftentimes is expensive.
Wow.
Okay.
We have one more hand, Sister Karen Plum.
Hello there, Elder. I was just wondering about the link between, we're talking about the mind and you've been talking about the body. Is there anything that we need to take into account of when we're dealing with all these long-term conditions to enhance the ability of our mind? Because obviously, healthy mind, healthy body, and then healthy body, healthy mind. So there is an interconnection, but it's about, obviously, is there anything dietary or are all the things that you are describing, they're going to enhance your mind? Because you've talked about circulation and cholesterol and all these other things. I would imagine that they impact upon the brain and can impact upon the function of the mind. But is there anything else that you can share with us to improve that? Because you were talking about Paul renewing your mind. So I'm just bringing you back to that. I know there's a spiritual element, but obviously there's a physical element and the social element too.
Yes, thank you very much. It's always a difficulty when you have high investment and then the business is falling apart. In this case, a relation is sick and you happen to be the main carer and you are emotionally attached and all that. I think from the things I've described, when you're looking after somebody in risk management, we are told if you are called out in an emergency, at that time, you are the most important person, not the person who's got the emergency challenge. Are you with me? So when you call the ambulance, the paramedics must make sure that they arrive at the place safe and sound. That's why they have the siren. The fact of the siren doesn't give the driver the right to be reckless. And when they get there, they have to first do environmental assessment. Most of us are not educated in that line. They assess the situation, and then they come into the place, they check your pulse, they check a few vitals and see that, do we give adrenaline shot to kickstart the system, or whatever actions we need to do. When you're looking after a sick person, your diet should be one that brings about relaxation of the body. So once or twice a week, I tell people to go on a juice fast. The juice fast, once the mind is not working properly, your digestion even slows down. Your heart rate even becomes sometimes a problem. Sometimes you get tremors, or sometimes you go dub, 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 dub. It's not because you have, you go to the hospital to check, your BP is fine. But the brain is so fatigued that the mind is fatigued, which affects the brain, and the brain electrical impulses to vital organs sometimes misses a beat. And so it's always good that you can do things that will give you internal relaxation. Secondly, you need to have someone you can talk to when you have a situation in which you are fully engaged in helping people. Thirdly, you need to also find something of recreation that will take the mind off. Yes, the spiritual element is important. So if you have a pastor or an elder or church brother or sister, you can sit and chat with. The next thing is, sometimes it's good to throw in the towel. When I say throw in the towel, not to give up on the person, but you're asking for external help. We often think that it's my baggage, so I've got to carry it to the end. And the mind becomes overwhelmed, and that leads to a gradual breakdown of the body. So there are several factors. Yes, the spiritual element, praying to God, but you need to have an outlet. You need to also have someone you can talk to, a social engagement. You need to also eat properly. Oftentimes you'll find that people who look after very ill people become depressed themselves, and they begin to neglect themselves. So call for help on time. And I think the church must also be sensitive to the fact that if somebody has a sick relation and they're in the church must also play their part in being a support to the person to alleviate the pain on the mind.
Thank you. Did you have any suggestions around the juicing at all?
Okay, I can give you a few things. Normally, to get things running through your system, you know, when people have problem with fluid retention and stuff, they get water tablets and stuff. Celery and parsley. Parsley is a super herb. For women, oregano, parsley, marjoram are good herbs that helps with your hormonal balance. When you combine that with celery, cabbage is for inflammation, and it has the folates, and then carrot will help clean the liver, the kidney. You may also go for psyllium husk, which is high fiber, because when your mind is troubled and it affects the brain and the signals are not going to the stomach to digest the food properly, sometimes one may get constipated. So the psyllium husk, you mix in water and drink it immediately. Then you drink another glass of water, because if you leave it, it will swell up like a tapioca, and then you find you can't drink it. But if you mix
that?
Psyllium husk,
yeah.
If you go to the health food store, they will tell you. So these days they have it in capsule. It's high fiber, so it helps. You can take it just before you eat your food, and it mixes with the food so that it keeps the food going and gently cleans the gut system, and it helps you with evacuation, so you don't get bunked up. So you do that. You also make sure you have your herbal teas. The Caribbeans, you use a lot of herbs. You can do, what do you call it? Rosemary tea. You can have sage. You can have some of your bitter bushes, cerasee, sorrel, with a bit of ginger that spikes the system, kicks the system. You can do a little turmeric in the things you eat with a dash of black pepper, because turmeric has an active ingredient called curcumin. And the only way it is absorbed appropriately is if you have a little extract of black pepper. You can buy the turmeric, the curcumin from the internet, Amazon, where they've already done the extraction and the combination with ginger. It also brings out inflammations in the system so that you look after yourself. And then you must go for long walks. One thing that is also useful is I don't kind of synchronize with the modern hymns. My children sing it sometimes. I have to listen very carefully before I get what is coming across, but I'm used to the hymns, but I'm sure the modern hymns, some have strong appeals, once you understand it. So get songs that lift you up. It affects the mind. And once the mind is relaxed, it helps the body to also relax. I hope I've done a little justice to the question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, indeed. And we're watching the time. AYS young people, time is virtually gone. If there are no more questions, we're going to hand back to our youth.
Can I ask one last question, please?
Yes, of course. Well,
What
Commission of our youth will happy to entertain.
What are the disadvantages of running, Pastor? Because I do the running. I don't walk, I run. Are you saying that it's not beneficial to the body?
Running is beneficial, but God didn't design our bodies to run. And I know there may be a lot of scientists who say, oh no, he does this, it's good for that, it's good for that. But as you go thumping, you have bone heads that are locked into the sockets. So shaking them, you don't have good shock absorbers. And it doesn't matter whether you're wearing your trainers with the air insoles and the bounds and all that. Your vertebrae, as you stump. The science is divided, but I prefer to do brisk walking, almost to a point of running, but not running, brisk walking, so that you don't kind of compressing the vertebrae. But some do marathon, some do long distance. But for me, if you study the Pen of Inspiration, she says, walking rightly done calls into action every sinew, tissue, muscle of the body. And you can, as I said, you can do tension exercises, stretches. When you look at the dog, anytime you call the dog or you see a dog, it's lying down for a while, when it gets up, stretches so that it eases the joints, so that circulation begins to take effect before it begins to move. So when you have a dog and you just drag it, it will slow down first, then it will lift the upper, the midstream, so it hunches itself, stretch, then it gets the blood flowing. And so stretches are good. You find as you age, you see Galatians 6:7, be not be deceived, for God is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, that also shall he reap. And if you run, there comes a time where you can't run again. And at that time, you've overstretched the system. But if you walk, you can walk and walk past your grave. So the choice is, basically the science is divided, but I opt for the walking.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Wow. Interesting.
Very
Not
interesting.
broken.
Sister, you're a walker or a runner? Sister Patient.
I'm a runner, so
Oh,
very
right.
interesting. I
Great,
like running.
great, excellent.
Adam was asked to to keep and dress the garden. He couldn't be running. He'll have to walk through, you know. And when you see, when you walk, you engage the whole body. You can observe things. So you're also challenging the mind. When you run, things just fly past. So it's a holistic thing. And you run along the road with the cars. So the more you inhale carbon dioxide, and if you're going to run, you've got to run about 5 o'clock when everybody's in bed, few cars, and the trees are pushing out the freshly made oxygen. Or you run after work when the lead and all the, even though they say it's lead free, all the high metals from the fumes of the car are saturated in the atmosphere, and all that. So I said we'll do a little exercise. Pastor, are we allowed to do it?
Yeah, if we don't have to move too far, are we gonna?
No,
have to
you're
go
not
around
moving.
the
You
block?
sit in your chair. You sit in your chair. And let me go back. So can you all see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Stretch your hand this way, up front.
You're gone.
Oh, but he's gone now.
Now, so imagine your hand, your roof caves in and you hold it, right? It was coming on your lap, so you hold it. Now, the roof is heavy, but you can't allow it to drop on your lap, so you lift it up. So tense your biceps and your muscles, your shoulder muscles, tense it up, and then try lifting it up, but you can't lift it. So you should come to a point where you can feel heat in the whole arm. You're trying to lift it, but it's pushing you down. Do you find the tension in there? Yeah, I can see past. No, don't stop. Don't stop, Pastor. I'm watching you. I'm watching you. Yeah. Close the arm to the body, and then come on, move it. Now you're not breathing. Breathe. And
but
keep
when I'm tensing, I want to stop breathing to just
keep doing it and breathe. If you're not breathing, I can see. Pastor, you're lifting too high. The thing is heavy, so it's down there, and you try to bring it up, and it's pushing you down. So there comes a time you grit your teeth now, and you're trying to get it up, and it's pushing you down. Can you feel the heat?
shoulders.
Sorry. Okay, so this is something you can do for 5 minutes if you do it well. Then you put your hand. Where am I? I'm lost. Okay. You put your hand above your head. This time it fell on your head, so you're lifting it up. You're lifting it up, else it's going to crash your neck on your head. So push it up. You should begin to feel some sweat. I can feel my head is wet. If you're doing it right. Can you feel the sweat? Lift it up. Lift it up. Can you feel the tension? Can you feel it? Yes, keep pushing.
I want.
Can you feel the? And there are other ones you do with your legs. You try and lift one leg down, you lift the heel of one up and use your two arms to push your knee down whilst you're lifting your heel up. So that you engage from top to bottom. When you do the right, then you come to the left.
Mm.
And you can do that and you'll be sweating, your heart will be pounding.
Mhm.
Okay.
Can you feel the heat in your body?
Yeah, it's warmer, definitely.
Can you
From
feel the
relax-
circulation?
From relaxation to exercise, yes.
And then when you finish, you just relax your body. Now you breathe in deep. And when you're breathing in, your stomach should come out, your abdomen, not stomach. Your abdomen should come out when you breathe in. And when you breathe out, it should go in. So you do that for 2-3 minutes, and then you repeat the same thing. And you find you do that. I would have done my marathon sitting on a chair, and my sister would be running. You know, if you have a garden, you can take a little chair out there, and you do your gentle exercises early in the morning. In the fresh air, I do my stretches. You can do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and you're good as gold. If I tell you that in Ghana, because of the stress and the pressures, my thyroid went berserk. So I'm hyperthyroid. I lost all my flesh on my body. I lost weight from 91 kilos to 65. You could literally count every bone. And my face, if you saw me, I tell people currently I'm ugly, beautiful. But previously I was handsomely beautiful.
They look the same.
Oh, right, good. I was going to say,
But you see, when I do this, you see my eyes.
You still look like David.
Well, you know me well, so, you know, thank God I've improved a lot. I've improved a lot, and thank God for his mercies, you know. So once you know what to do, don't worry. Rome wasn't built in a day. Christ is coming, we make every preparation, but Sister White says, occupy till I come. So we do the best we can and work with the mind. And that's why my last point, never say to anybody, you are too sensitive. You are too, what's the word we use here? Too touchy. Because we are at different levels in terms of our emotional packaging. And you could easily create a cane in the family. So when somebody says, I can't back off, sometimes I back to my girls come and they say, oh, Daddy, I've died. And it seems to have almost answers to everything. But gradually I'm learning that sometimes it's good, irrespective of my experiences of whatever it is when I was in the workplace. You got to sometimes listen, hear them out, and give them time. You know, so we all, God is working on us till he can finally get the dross out of us. Thank you very much, Pastor.
Thank you very much. Over to the Adventist Youth. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your questions. Very inspiring to learn from your questions.
Thank you.
Diane.
Bye. Bye.
All right, so
you've been leaning back, lean forward. That's why I didn't recognize you.
Who?
That's Diana.
Have a good weekend.
Yes, that's Diana.
Okay, thank you for your program. We hope to see you again. And yeah, hope you enjoy your evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's do closing prayer.
yeah.
Okay, can we ask someone to close us off in prayer, please?
Let's pray to close. Our Father, who art in heaven, we thank you once again for another session that you've given us to discuss, to learn new things, to reiterate the things that we know already. We thank you for your man servant, that he's dedicated his time to spend time with us, to advise us, to give us some insight on how to keep our minds and our physical health. Lord, we pray that you continue to bless him and his ministry. We ask that you continue to bless us, the New Addington Church and Hope Church, that with the knowledge that we have been given, we continue to realize our bodies are your temple, and you've given us these bodies to look after, that we will use the health principles that we learn, and that we will be able to serve you better because we will be healthy both in our minds and physically. We thank you, Lord, for these opportunities, and we ask that you continue to bless each and every one of us till we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Bless you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right,
Yeah.
Pastor.
Dr. Amy, thank